chapter 30, verses 15 and 16. The leech has two daughters, give and give. Three things are never satisfied, four never say enough. Sheol, the bare womb, the land never satisfied with water, and the fire that never says enough.
Be seated, please. In 1951, a British-American adventure film was made. Some of you may recall seeing it, The African Queen. Directed by John Huston, produced by Sam Spiegel and John Wolfe, based upon the novel, 1935 novel by C.S. Forester. It was a movie, an action movie, in which Humphrey Bogart would later on win the Academy Award for Best Actor, and Katharine Hepburn was said to be perhaps her very best in that particular movie. Obviously, I was not there when the movie came out in 1951, but I do recall seeing it probably as a young adult somewhere. And I like to remember for the very first time, remember seeing something that was gross, in which, as the captain of the African Queen, he and Katharine Hepburn were trying to escape the German U-boats and other people that were after them. And so he took the African Queen through the river and had to actually get out into the water and push it through the muck and the mud and other such things. And it was then when Charlie came back on to the African Queen that he was covered with the leeches. I thought about showing that film, that picture, but I decided that probably it would be so gross to some of you folks having eaten that we would not have a very nice time the rest of our time together. So I decided I would just avoid that. But probably if you have seen the movie, or you do see the movie, you will likely be able to understand what we're talking about. In the context of this particular passage, you may recall that you're thinking, where in the world's wrong going to get anything about a leech? Well, it's Proverbs chapter 30 talks about that. And the point that Solomon is making is that there are some things that never, ever say enough. And therefore, Agul is trying to give us a picture of things that are insatiable. Now, you have to recall that this is written in the book of Proverbs, and obviously the writer of Proverbs is always at a point in time trying to remind us of what a proverb is. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing and righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. So in this particular one, we have wisdom trying to be given. We have a word picture of something that we can understand that will give us some kind of understanding that we want to comprehend. Now, this particular one likely reminds us of a numeric riddle. You may recall in chapter 6, verse 16, Solomon will say, there are 6 things the Lord hates. No, let's make that 7. And then he mentions 7 terrible things that the Lord does not want, or the Lord hates in every kind of way. Well, in the same regard here in chapter 30, you have this lesson that we're going to look at that comes from Leech. And the idea here is that this is a list that can continue to go on and on and on. But the moral of the story is this. There are insatiable things that sometimes can remind us of insatiable people. Have you ever known someone that has a lot of money and they still want more? Sometimes some of us may seem to be that way when it comes to our collection of, you fill in the blank. It may be your collection of things that you grew up with that you have always admired. It could be some kind of figurine. It could be some kind of piece of jewelry. It could be some kind of gun or some kind of athletic equipment. There never is enough. And the warning seems to be, as King Agul is telling us, you got to be satisfied. You've got to learn that little word that none of us like to think about whenever it is that we're looking for something that we feel like that we have to have. Contentment. You know, there was a man in prison one time that wrote something about contentment. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation, King James says state, I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound in any and every circumstance. I've learned the secret, notice that, the secret of having plenty and also having hunger, abundance as well as need. And so here the writer is talking about, okay, there are some things in life that never say enough. And he mentions 4 or 5 of those things. But he starts out by talking about a leech. Now, let me go ahead and warn you. I'm going to show you a picture of a leech, okay? I'm trying to get, this is a G-rated picture of a leech. Believe me, there's someone in the audience that knows this because we were picking out pictures and they were saying, gross, no, not that one, not that one. So we picked the most inane picture we could possibly come up with of a leech. Well, what is a leech? Now, let me go ahead and warn you, you're not going to like the definition, but go ahead, this is bad when you have to put in a word before you say the thing you're about to do. But here's the definition of a leech. Any blood-sucking or carnivorous, aquatic, or terrestrial worm of the class Hydronia, certain flesh-water species of which were formerly much used in medicine for bloodletting. That's an educational kind of definition for leeches. Now, you don't have to do this right here and right now. But just to be sure that I had done my research, I checked a few moments ago before I came from the office, and I asked the question, Google, are leeches still used in medicine today? And I have several nurses already nodding their heads this way. It is still a reality to be used for certain circumstances today. In fact, Dr. Bill Lineweaver, a surgeon of the University of Mississippi Medical Center, says that leeches are the best option for safely removing congested blood from a wound. And he went into describe in great detail what happens or what a leech does in regard to the idea of what it medically does in taking care of congested blood that will not move away from an extremity. And he gave, Dr. Lineweaver gave an example. He said, if you somehow cut off a finger and you're deciding to go back and put it back together again, he says this is what they are ideal for. They suck the blood slowly and steadily because they are able to take it and they're able to reattach because veins are fragile and crumple up together. The leech can build, as it were, taking that blood out of that area, causing the veins time to as it were, reinvent themselves so that they're able to become a healthy finger again that's been amputated and then put back together again. Now, there's a lot of more information I could go into, but the point of the matter is leeches are still used today. Oh, by the way, it's a great bargain, $7 for a leech. I thought that was rather interesting, but they are still used today. You don't want me to tell you what they do if they decide not to use a leech, what they do to your finger. You don't want to hear that because it described that as well, and that just got painful me thinking about it. But the point of the matter is, the idea of it's never enough. Well, that's the idea of what a leech is. Now, what's also interesting is when I went to the internet site for the definition of the leech that I just read to you a moment ago, there was, there's obviously other meanings of the word itself. Well, here's another meaning of the word leech. A person who clings to another for personal gain, especially without giving anything in return, and usually with the implication or the effect of exhausting the other's resources. Parasite. Oh, wow. Have you ever met some people like that? Individuals that because of their nature, because of their situation of life, because of the way they were raised, because of the way they were not raised, because of anything and everything, they seem to be that of a leech. So I asked the question, who are leeches, humanly speaking? Who are folks that are like parasites? They're always wanting more. What about the alcoholic who's looking for just one more drink? Or the adulterer that looks for yet one more affair to get involved in? Or their life's already a mess, but they're still looking for just one more time. The prideful, who because of their pride want everyone to pat them on the back and to tell them how great they are, and yet they're looking for yet one more compliment. The jealous, who've taken from you before, but they also want what you have now as well. The lustful. Remember David? He looked the first time to Bathsheba, but then he also looked the second time and the third time as well. What about the lazy? They're looking for just one more handout. Just let me borrow some money just one more time. I can't work. I don't feel like working. You get the idea. The rebellious. The folks who just want to experience the wild side one more time. The person that's financially irresponsible. Let me just borrow. This will be the last time. I promise you, I won't ever do this again. And then perhaps just as bad of all of these, the unfaithful, the apostate, that just begs for your tolerance. Because you see, they don't want to change their life. They just want you to be empathetic or sympathetic to them one more time. Let me read the definition again. A person who clings to another for personal gain, especially without giving anything in return, and usually with the implication or the effect of exhausting the other person's resources. A parasite. Now, I don't know how you disconnect leeches. When I asked Beth to look at some pictures, we were doing research and I was looking at the African queen stuff, she said that they actually have pictures of which they put the fake leeches on Humphrey Bogart's body. Well, if you watch the movie, they didn't do it that way. And some of you remember how they actually went in to do it with some kind of powder that they put on. But the point of the matter is, leeches can be disconnected. If people want to change, there's always that willingness to change. That's the point. As long as we're breathing, there's always the opportunity for us to do better. And also, if we choose not to do better, we can even choose to do worse. But if people were to refuse to make changes, then you have a choice you can make. And this is hard. You disconnect from them. It may be necessary to do so. Because you see, the definition of a leech is that they can suck you dry. And when that happens, what's next? But I want you to go back to the definition, or back to the text itself. As King Agur is talking about things that are insatiable, things that never get enough, and he gives us several of those things: Sheol, and the barren wound, and land that needs water. He says the leech has two daughters: give and give. In other words, it's wanting everything you have. As I was looking and researching for this, several very prominent Americans of the past died from bloodletting, because they actually thought that the way you take care of infection is you go in and you drain the blood away from that. Well, obviously they found out very quickly you got to have blood in which to live. And several famous Americans of years past died because of bloodletting. But from a spiritual perspective, if what we're doing is causing us to always look out for ourselves and never for anybody else, if it's always about give to me, what does that have to do with what Paul said in 1 Timothy chapter 6? Godliness with contentment is great gain. Paul, do you know? Paul, have you ever been without? Yes. Have you ever had plenty? A few times. But I know this through inspiration: godliness with contentment is great gain. That's the thing to look up to. That's the thing that we need to want the most. And then in a very practical way, Paul reminds us: you bring anything into this world, and you can't take out anything as well. In our lifetime, it is very troublesome to know someone that acts like that of a leech. You have to be very patient. You have to be very tolerant. You have to, instead of saying what you may think, try to be kind and loving as much as possible. But I'd like for you to think about this one different kind of way. What if God saw us as a leech? It's a little bit different, isn't it? When God looks at our hearts, when He looks at my life, when He looks at your life, what does He see? Does He see someone that's always asking and wanting more? Or someone that is so blessed and so content with how they are blessed that they want to give to others to honor His name? Well, that's what King Agur said. Leech has two daughters: give and give. would my Lord today, looking at my heart and my life, say, thank you for not being a leech? Or would he say, sadly, you're one of those? Lesson's yours. If you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, we invite you to